Well, on the shelf of your local Target is a book you might pick up the day before Valentine's Day, rushing to figure out what to get for your love. The title is In Love, a Memoir, and if you rushed and put the book in your basket, you would miss the rest of the title, A Memoir of Love and Loss. The book by Amy Bloom, which those of you who've been sitting here listened to an excerpt from, isn't for everyone as a gift for Valentine's Day. It's a book about a wife who, while losing her husband to Alzheimer's, helps him die. It's about the ups and the downs of that disease that I have seen so many times in our church. Partners drifting away as on a raft out to sea. Healthy bodies, confused minds. It has happened in my family, and it has happened in yours, or it will. More than 6 million Americans of all ages have Alzheimer's. An estimated 6.7 million Americans aged 65 and older are living with Alzheimer's this year. 73% are age 75 and older. That means that 1 in 9 people who's 65 and older has Alzheimer's. Today's This American Life podcast was about this and more. For those of you who didn't listen to it, remember that your homework for Sunday is to listen to the podcast. But if you didn't, it's about Amy Bloom and her husband who begins to drift away. In the August of 2019, 2 months before he turned 66, Brian Amici, oldest son of a large Italian Catholic family, architect, fisherman, a Yale football hero, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. They had married in 2007. She had suspected that something was wrong for the last 3 years of his life. Now, after an MRI, second neurology consult, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. In Bloom's account, as I read, it said, it took Brian less than a week to decide that the long goodbye of Alzheimer's was not for him. He decided, in less than a week, for Bloom to find Dignitas after he asked her to help him die. Now, assisting a person in suicide is considered murder in American states, except for California, Colorado, Oregon, Vermont, Montana, New Jersey, Maine, Hawaii, Washington, and the District of Columbia. But all of those require that a person be a resident, be assessed by 2 physicians as having only 6 months to live, and able to express the wish to die orally and in writing with 2 local physicians. For the record, this church is and has been strongly in support with death with dignity for many years. We have supported the choice that someone might make to end their life like that, in that situation. We have held workshops with the Hemlock Society, and we have held talks on the right to decide where and when to die when one is facing a chronic illness or the debilitating factors that change their lives. The story in today's podcast has a conclusion, and it ends with all of us listening in tears as Bloom steps away into the taxi, leaving her husband in the hands of the professionals in Zurich as he dies. Now, if you didn't tear up or just feel the pain of that separation listening to that, I have some questions for you. The epigraph of the book is, "Please write about this, my husband said." Now, I could stop here and dive deeply into death with dignity. I could talk about bodily autonomy, the choices we make, and how important it is for us to have those choices in life. I could talk about the religious fights and politics that are waged on this topic and probably will surface again someday as another cultural war. And I could talk about the difference between suicide and assisted suicide, with suicide being the one that leaves a wreckage behind, a trail of mental illness and how it affects families. I have seen the latter up close as your pastor. I have buried my share of people who have committed suicide, and I never want to do that again. And I could talk about the podcast that you didn't listen to. Just kidding. Since I shamed you last week, I figured more of you probably listened to it. Is it true? Is it true? Yeah, okay. Or I could go into the cornerstone question the podcast raises, which goes beyond the issues of choice and bodily autonomy, to the question that goes like this. What are the upper limits of what you would do for someone you love? What are they? Supposing that everyone here has loved someone and been loved by someone, even if they didn't want to be. Loving is a human condition that none of us are immune to. Most of us love someone right now, or we have friendships that call us to go beyond ourselves. I can't count the many times that I have received calls from ex-husbands or ex-wives or partners who felt the need to help the very person that broke their hearts. Because sometimes love extends past the hurts we encounter and the divisions we live with. And I know how parents have gone around the world and back to save a child, some literally and some figuratively, and some have succeeded and some have failed. And I know myself how love drives my care for my family, even when I know I should be tougher or more differentiated. I want to help and relieve the suffering of those I love. Few of us escape this dilemma. And perhaps the hardest version of this is in friendship, where there are no bloodline bonds or formal relationship contracts. We willingly enter into friendships. We are not compelled to stay in them except by an emotional bond. And I speak to you today knowing that I have done this well in friendship and I have done this poorly. I have lost friendships I should have worked on, and I have worked on friendships I should have lost. But the place in that Venn diagram that is the push and pull of friendship is what is interesting to me today. What are the upper limits of what you would do for someone you love who is a friend, who can drive you crazy, who you can't save, but you love all the same? I am thinking of this question because I am 3 days from a vacation during which for 2 weeks a friend of mine and I will launch out on our bicycles loaded with camping gear on trails and back roads in the wilderness of Colorado. Last summer, we rode back roads and paths from Canada to New York City. The summer before, we rode up the coast of California. We have been friends for 34 years. I married him to his wife, and I walked him through his divorce to that same wife. He took me in so many times into his home, and I have counseled him late at night on phone calls about relationships and parenting. In college, I had to kick him off the radio station we were both part of for his use of obscenities. I was an officer in the station. He was a green Mohawk punk-loving rebel. And I talked with him in that room right there 10 minutes before Christmas Eve services when his mother was dying in the hospital. And he has called me in similar situations at my father's end. My friend probably drinks too much. He makes some interesting decisions about relationships, but I love him. My friend and I are so different that not any of you would pick us out as friends together. One time when his child was small, he bought goats. Now, this friend of mine lives in the urban neighborhood of Oakland, California. So in order to exercise his goats, he figured out a great way was to put them on leashes, get on a skateboard, and have his daughter roller skate out in front of him. When his goats headbutted a small child interested in petting them, just as the mother was coming out of the house and his daughter was taking off on the skates, the goats tore off, pulling his skateboard down the road at a rapid pace. He ended up in a next door report saying, "Beware, an unusual and dangerous crazy goat man on a skateboard is going around our neighborhood hurting children with his goats." All of his friends threatened to make t-shirts with a silhouetted man with leashes on a skateboard and goats with the report on his back. Crazy goat man. That is my friend. And what are the upper limits of what I would do for him? If I'm honest, just about anything. Which is probably the answer to the question most of us have about those we love. Because what is life if it isn't lived for each other? What is love if it isn't enacted in acts that extend our ability to be irrational sometimes? What is loyalty except, as I wrote in my book, but a version of faith, a commitment of the self at the deepest level, a pledge of the heart, a radical centering in the holy mystery of life that is seen in relationships? Our relationships aren't just ours also, so to speak. They are holy in a way. For this, I turn to the Unitarian sage Ralph Waldo Emerson one more time. His friendship, the famous friendship with his friend Henry David Thoreau, is well documented. The two friends amplified each other's goodness through a boundless generosity of spirit. Emerson said, "I must feel pride in my friend's accomplishments as if they are mine, and a property in his virtues I feel as warmly when he is praised." And echoing Aristotle's assertion that a friend holds up a mirror to us and thus brings us closer to ourselves, Emerson outlines the two key elements of a true, solid, soul-fortifying friendship. One is truth. A friend is a person with whom I may be sincere, Emerson says. Before him, I may think aloud and may deal with him with the simplicity and wholeness with which one chemical atom meets another. And the other element of friendship is tenderness for Emerson. We are holden to those friends, he said, by every sort of tie. By pride, by fear, by hope, by lust, by hate, by admiration, by every circumstance and badge and trifle, but we can scarce believe that so much character can subsist in another as to draw us by love, he says. What are the upper limits of what you would do for a friend? A wife, a child, a husband, a cousin, a crazy goat man on a skateboard? The answer is probably the same. Whatever it takes to draw us together by the highest love, or else maybe it's not worth our energy. I would say this is the holy work we find in friendship and relationships, that we hold each other close, but we also give one another autonomy. The freedom to be who they are, but the loving embrace of who they are. Amy Bloom, in her book On That Shelf in Target, writes this: in a true partnership, the kind worth striving for, the kind worth insisting on, and even, frankly, worth divorcing over, both people try to give as much or even a little more than they get. Deserves is not the point, she says. Owes is not the point. The point is to make the other person as happy as we can because their happiness adds to ours. The point is that in the right hands, everything that you give, you get. We can all try to live up to this, I think, even though I know I fail at it often, especially in friendship, but it is the intention that matters here. To ask ourselves, what are the upper limits of what we would do for someone we love? To go to the end of the earth for them? Probably. Because what is life worth if we don't? I will see you in a few weeks, friends, if I survive. I love you all. Amen.